the Phoenix Suns because they have been phenomenal. This was brought to my attention because somebody had commented that, hey, the Suns are the second seed in the West. They jumped up in the rankings. Have you guys talked about it? And I read the comment and I said, no, we haven't yet. So it's something we have to talk about. So the Phoenix Suns are 24-11. They're second in the Western Conference, and they are on a 4-game winning streak. How dangerous do you think the Phoenix Suns will be in the playoffs? And before I let you go, I'll just say this. Monty Williams has done a tremendous job, and they have done a tremendous job drafting for as much slack as they get. Mikal Bridges was an excellent pick. Cameron Johnson was an excellent pick. Deandre Ayton, he was the number one pick, and even though he gets overshadowed because Luka was in that draft and Trey, I think Ayton was a solid pick as well. And I mean, they're building a really good core of players, but what do you make of the Phoenix Suns?
When you look at them, they had a tough stretch towards the end of January where I think they had some COVID issues, and then they came back and they lost a couple games in a row. And since then, they've been on a tear. They've only lost 3 games since the end of January, and they have really started to turn it around. Chris Paul has been a major key, bringing that veteran leadership and really turning around the identity of that program from last season where, they had Devin Booker, they had Ayton, they had the talent, and though they caught fire late and in the bubble, I feel like they didn't have that veteran experience to put them over the top. Not only has Chris Paul come in and been the perfect playmaker to pair with this group, but he's brought that edge that they needed. Devin Booker has been playing a lot better, and just all around, they've been a better unit. When you talk about what they can be and how much of a threat they could be in the West, I wouldn't quite put them on that level with the Lakers, the Clippers, the Jazz, but I will say I have them right there with the Nuggets as a team that I think can surprise a lot of people come playoff time. I've said it about the Nuggets, and we'll talk about them. I think they could be a team that could sneak past the Lakers, the Clippers, or Jazz in a certain playoff series if things fall their way. I think the Suns can do the same thing if they keep playing this way in the second half. It's a big question mark because they're so young, because we haven't seen that consistency out of them in the past, and this is the first time we're really seeing this group with Chris Paul and getting them all on the floor together over a consistent basis of time. But if they can keep that consistent play over the second half, I think they could be a really dangerous team and one that nobody's going to want to see in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And before I go, the person who talked about the Phoenix Suns was Apex Prowler, the one who donated $5 to us in the stream earlier. And I'm just going to say this. I'm sorry I forgot that it was you that mentioned it. We get a lot of comments a day, and it is really hard to remember who said what specifically, but thank you for bringing the Suns to our attention. Now to give my take, they are 12th in points per game this season, 3rd in opponents' points per game, so their defense is really good. And when we talk about the Phoenix Suns, we thought the Suns were going to be a really good offensive team. I don't think we saw this defense from them. They are a really good defensive team. They're second in net rating, surprisingly. First is the Jazz, but second is the Phoenix Suns at plus 6.4. And I think earlier in the year we had made a video talking about Devin Booker because personally for me, I was waiting on Devin Booker to be Devin Booker because I think to start the season, he was still adjusting to Chris Paul, so he wasn't really playing to the level that I thought he could play to. But as of recently, he's averaging 25 points per game, shooting 49% from the field and 36% from three. Devin Booker has been amazing as of late. Chris Paul averaging 16-9, and Deandre Ayton averaging 14.5 and 11 rebounds per game. And then you got other guys like Mikal Bridges has took a major step in scoring, averaging close to 14 points per game, and Cameron Johnson averaging 10 points per game. There are 7 Phoenix Suns players averaging in double figures right now. But I'm going to say this. Although I think they're a dangerous team for some teams in the first round of the playoffs, like I think you can look at the Jazz. I don't think the Jazz would like to face the Phoenix Suns. The Clippers maybe a little bit, but outside of when we talk about the Lakers and Clippers, I don't think they're necessarily worried about the Suns because the Suns have some major concerns that worry me. One is guard depth. You have Chris Paul, but who else is coming? Are you going? Yeah, I like Cameron Payne and I like Langston Galloway, but are you going to count on Cameron Payne and Langston Galloway in the playoffs? Are you going to count on Javon Carter in the playoffs? I just wouldn't. And then they don't have a rim protector off the bench. They have bigs like Dario Saric and Frank Kaminsky, and those two are good offensive players who can space the floor, but are they rim protectors? They aren't rim protectors. And when we talk about teams like the Lakers, the Nets, what is the thing that we always talk about? They need a rim protector. But when we talk about the Phoenix Suns, it feels like it just goes above people's heads and they don't need that. Yes, they still do need that. They need that badly. And right now in the playoff standings, they would face the Spurs in the first round. I think they can beat them pretty easily. I think it'd be a 5-game series at most.
Yeah.
The Spurs should get swept that series. But if the Suns were to face the Mavericks, am I going to give the edge to the Suns? I think that's a 7-game series.
That's a tough match.
I think the Suns versus Mavs is a 7-game series. I don't think it's a cakewalk for the Suns. You look at any team the Suns would play in the first round, whether it be the Mavs or the Nuggets or the Jazz maybe or the Lakers, the Clippers, just any team they could face in the playoffs. Yes, the Suns can win, but those teams can just as easily beat the Suns as well. So I think it's a toss-up for me. I think they can give any team a run for their money, but ultimately it's going to come down to how good is Devin Booker going to be in the playoffs? Is he going to be Donovan Mitchell when he made his first playoff appearance his rookie year, or is he going to be Chris Middleton-esque? Not to be disrespectful, but how is Booker going to be? Because this is his first go-around in the playoffs, so we're not sure.
Yeah, is he an alpha dog or is he a number 2 option? And I don't think there's any shame in being a really good number 2 option, but it's something they got to figure out with him. And I would say the Suns are a very Jekyll and Hyde team. In a sense, they can come out and give you a stretch of games where they look like the best team in the league, and then they could come out a week later and look like a totally different team. And you mentioned it. They don't have that depth that you see with the Jazz. They don't have that punch off the bench like the Jazz do with Jordan Clarkson and a couple other nice pieces that have provided for them this season. So, when you're comparing teams, for a team without a major superstar, I think the Jazz should be the blueprint, and the Suns don't have all the luxuries that the Jazz do to complement the lack of that superstar talent like a LeBron James or a Kawhi Leonard. So it's definitely an uphill battle, but I do think, like you said, they're a tough out for pretty much any team in the West. I guess if you're the Suns, you look at it, like you said, if the season ended today, I think the Spurs in the first round is a really good matchup for them. And then they would see the Lakers in the second round, and you'd have to hope that, they don't get back to form with Anthony Davis being sidelined, and you never know. Maybe they get a little bit lucky in a crazy season.
I don't know. I think even without Anthony Davis, LeBron can beat the Suns.
I would agree.
LeBron with Harold, Schroeder, and all those guys, they can beat the Suns. They drafted Jalen Smith. He's been a
huge disappointment.
Yes, he hasn't played at all. If Tyrese Halliburton was there, this conversation would be a bit different. And I keep on banging on that table because we were here. We did a live stream on draft night. We had over 900 views on that live stream. We live streamed on draft night. And when the Suns picked Jalen Smith over Tyrese Halliburton, we both said, wow, that was a miss. How could you miss that bad? Like, you need a point guard of the future, and you don't go Tyrese Halliburton. Even though they did trade for Chris Paul, I mean, they still needed a guy to be his successor. Chris Paul is not your future. He is your now. So we both on draft night thought that was a huge miss. But I also want to say this. Deandre Ayton has to take that next step. Like, I know he's a really good center, but out of Arizona, we thought he was going to be a great center. I mean, they were comparing him to Shaq coming out of Arizona. He was supposed to be that guy. And to this point, he has been a guy, a really solid guy, but he has not been a 20 and 12.
Yeah,
he has not.
Star.
Yes, he has not been a Joel Embiid. Like, we were expecting Ayton to be a Joel Embiid right now. And to his defense, I'll say this: the Suns have a lot of scorers on that team, and it's kind of hard to see where Ayton fits in all that. But regardless, I mean, Ayton has to emerge into a star. Like, right now, it's Booker and Chris Paul, and Ayton is third. But Booker and Paul are the stars, and Ayton is a step below.
Yeah.
Ayton has to be just there with them when it comes to star power. I even told you before the season when the Suns got Chris Paul, I said, I think this makes Deandre Ayton an all-star. Yeah. And that's what my expectations were for him this season. It hasn't been to that point that as of late or this season so far. Maybe I'm, putting too much expectations on Ayton, but that's what I think he should have been.
And when we talked in the preseason previews, I looked at the end of the season last year for the Suns, and Deandre Ayton played really well for him. And that was when they started to turn things around. They made a playoff push, and they came up just short, literally like one great Damian Lillard game short of making the playoffs. And I said it, that Deandre Ayton suspension at the beginning of last season was probably the difference between the Suns making it and not making it. And I thought that having him on the court all season this year was going to be the big difference. I thought this was going to be him taking the big step. And you said it, he hasn't done that yet. And another guy you mentioned, Jalen Smith, even though I thought it was the wrong pick, he still could have had a big impact for this team. You said it, they're looking for that rim-protecting big to come off the bench, and I thought he could have been that out of Maryland. He did a good job there in college last season, but he just hasn't done anything. He's played in 11 games, 5 minutes a night, and he hasn't provided any impact for him. So even if they could have gotten anything out of him, it could have been a nice boost, but that pick missing is going to hurt them, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, I agree totally, but we do think the Phoenix Suns are a really great team, but we just have to see how they do in the playoffs, but they deserve a lot of credit. This was a team who hasn't made the playoffs in like 10 years. They've been waiting to get to the playoffs. They were they were the 9th seed last year, and now they're the 2nd. So they deserve a lot of credit. Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Ayton, Monty Williams, that whole organization, James Jones, they have done a tremendous job. So this is not taking away from them at all.
No.
But we have to see what they do in the playoffs because this is their first go-around in a long time.
Yeah, and I would say they are one of my favorite teams to watch. They are a really enjoyable, fun style of basketball to watch.